Hi, Caleb with Brownells here, and in today's quick tip, we're going to be changing the gas key on a bolt carrier group. Now, there's a lot of reasons you may do this. A lot of you may not want to do this, but it is something that does need to be done from time to time. And the parts we're actually talking about here, so this is your AR-15 bolt carrier. We went ahead and removed the actual bolts and all the other internals here, so we're left with just the carrier. Now, the part we're referring to, this piece up here, this is your gas key. So whenever you actually fire your firearm, gas is going to come from the gas tube into this gas key down into the bolt carrier group and cycle everything. Now, if your gas key is just even the slightest bit loose, gas is going to leak out and it's going to cause malfunctions. And actually, a lot of times, whenever someone has a loose gas key, that's the last thing they think to check. They do gas block alignment, all this other stuff, when the issue is actually sitting right here on their bolt carrier. So, the point here is a loose gas key or an just improperly installed gas key in general will definitely cause malfunctions. So, let's talk about how to actually replace it. So, replacing it is a bit of a process. There's a right way to do it, and there's definitely a wrong way to do it. There's a lot of wrong ways to do it. But if you want one reinstalled that's going to last, follow these steps, you'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and get this old gas key off. Yours will probably be a bit easier to remove if it is loose, but this one is not. This is a Knights Armament sand cutter bolt carrier group that we're going to be butchering for this process. So yeah, this one was on here pretty good. So what we're going to do is just take a bit here and loosen it. Just break those screws there. And before I go through with this here, if you look, you'll see that these screws are staked, which is good. That's what you want to see. So we're gonna have to break those stakes to get this thing off, and that can be a bit of a process here. And we'll just loosen those. And pull them right off. Alright. So if yours was indeed leaking, now you can look at this one here. I'll put it right here so you can see. Alright, so if yours was indeed leaking, it would be extremely dirty. Right around here, this gas port. Now there would be just all kind of carbon buildup and everything else around there. So I've taken apart some cheaper bolt carrier groups just to kind of look at them after shooting a lot of rounds through them. I'm not going to say any names or anything, but there was a lot of carbon buildup right around here. Some kind of in different areas where it tried to creep out because just everything wasn't machined flat and flush like it should be. And they were gonna fail eventually a lot sooner than a better quality bolt carrier group would. So this is one of those things that separates your just as good AR-15 crowd from your quality AR-15. And that's gonna be longevity of function. So just a cheap bolt carrier group with a cheap gas key will fail before a more expensive one for that reason. So what we want to do in your guys' case here, we would want to clean that area up, even though this one's already pretty clean. I'll just walk you through that process. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee, and then I'm going to move my coffee cup very far away. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some steel wool, and depending on what you have here, you might want to use some carbon cutter, whatever cleaner you may have. I can actually just use a bit of gun scrubber. And we'll just hit it with our steel wool. You just want to get this channel nice and clean. And regardless of what material your bolt carrier group is made of, you're going to want... Alright, that's looking pretty good. We'll hit it with some compressed air. Yeah, so like I was saying, regardless of what material your bolt carrier group is made of, you're going to want this area degreased. for this next part of the process here. So degrease everything. You can use gun scrubber, you can use acetone, whatever your choice of degreaser is, no big deal. So we just hit this with some gun scrubber and some air. So we know that there's no, this area is degreased. We're good here. So you also want to check these threads if whoever made your bolt carrier group put a lot of Loctite on those threads. We don't use any Loctite. I'll show you why. But you'll want to clean those out as well. So what we'll do now is kind of get everything prepped here. And so we have our new gas key. This is the new one we're going to be replacing it with. It's just a standard mil-spec, good quality gas key. And we have some new screws. Now, because these were staked, and let me see if I can get this one off here, just to give you a visual reference. I'm trying to do this like as Bob Rossi as possible here, because this is going to be a little bit longer of a video. But I know he always says there's no mistakes, only happy little accidents. And what we're doing, there's definitely mistakes, so I can't go full Bob Ross. I'm sorry, guys. All right, so let's compare this old screw, and this old screw, you can see they did actually Loctite the threads, which they didn't plan on anyone taking this thing apart ever. But we're not going to put any Loctite on the threads just in case you have to change it again. It's just going to make everything way harder. This one was actually pretty difficult to get off compared to other ones I've worked with here. And all right, so let's take a look here. If you look at this screw, you can see that the top of it is actually knurled. And that's what the screw should look like. The knurls on this one are rounded off because it was staked, and we unscrewed it and broke that stake. So, full disclosure, these replacement screws we have here, I've had these for maybe 10 plus years. I just pulled them out of my armorer's kit. So these replacement screws are actually pretty old. What you want to be sure of, though, whenever you're choosing your replacement screws, and if you buy them from Brownells, you don't have to worry about this, but you want to make sure you're using grade 8 fasteners. So you don't want to use any cheap brittle steel, because these screws can shear under pressure of operation. So don't go out and buy the cheapest screw you can. Just buy a good quality grade 8 fastener for this. Like I said, that's the ones Brownells carries. So, all right. With all that being said, let's get the rest of this set up here. If you look at this crazy contraption I have here, this is the Brownells jig for actually staking these. So I'll walk you through how to use that, and we'll continue on from here. So before we actually do that, though, we're going to get everything set up on this. Now, I also have with me some 638 Loctite. This is one of the very few times it's okay to use Loctite on your AR-15, okay? So this is actually the retaining compound, which is what those crazy people out there are bedding their barrels with. That this is a way more appropriate use for it. So this here, we'll just kind of set that aside, and we will begin prepping the actual replacement key. So what I see a lot of people do, number one mistake is that they'll just take their new key, slap it on there, torque it down, think they're good to go. You're not. What you need to do at this point. All right, I have a few India stones here, also from Brownells. So these, we've got some pretty heavy use on these. These are actually made for the ones that we carry here. They're designed with doing sear work, like changing angles on sears for fire control groups and different firearms. So they are very flat. You're going to want one that is very flat for this. Now during the manufacturing process, manufacturers try and make this as flat as possible, but they only get it so flat, we got to go the rest of the way, which is perfectly fine, perfectly understandable. So I'm going to take a little bit of oil on this stone here, if I can remember how to open up the child-safe bottles here. And I'm just going to put some oil on my stone. Alright. So if you look, the bottom of this right now is just a phosphate finish. And I'll show you what we're looking for while we do this here. So I want to keep the actual part we're stoning. Let me move some of this for you guys here. I'm going to keep the part we're stoning on full contact on the stone. And I'm just going to work it here. Alright, we should be able to see something now. Yep, this is a perfect example. Alright, so you can see where the material was removed, right? So what we want to see is we want this shiny surface to be all the way around the edges so that we know it's flat and we're getting a good seal. Now, of course, it can only be as good as your bolt carrier group, which again, buying a good bolt carrier is important. Brownells does make good bolt carriers, by the way, our bolt carrier groups. But whatever, we're not here to talk about that. Okay, so obviously with this, we're going to need to keep going. So let's do that. And it is a little bit difficult when you're using a narrow stone like this. So one of the tricks I kind of found is what I'll do, I'll let my fingers actually overhang on the sides, and those are going to be touching the side of the stone. And that helps me keep the actual part I'm stoning center on said stone. And we'll just check it again. Alright, you can see we're getting closer, but we're not there yet. And as I'm going here, I'm just applying a bit of pressure. Another thing to kind of look out for here, or another thing to definitely look out for, I should say, is your actual stones themselves. So over time, your stones will wear out, and they can get waves in them and different things like that. Obviously, you want to avoid that. I like using these because they have 4 sides to them, and with those 4 sides, you can just, if one side gets bad, you just flip it and keep going. You get basically 4 stones for the price of 1, if you think about it there. Alright, we'll check that one more time. Alright, I'll show you guys what I'm looking at here. Still not there yet. And we're removing, I know, like, another concern is, aren't you making your gas key sit lower? Technically, yes, because we're removing material, but we're removing such a small amount of material that it's not gonna make a difference here. It's way better to do this than to just have an uneven surface where gas is going to be leaking out of. Because if we installed this the way it was, obviously it would not seal because it is not flat, and we would get some leak. And I try to just casually carry on conversation whilst completing a task. Just painting happy trees here, happy little tree. Alright, so we'll check that again. And you can see that the back of this was actually the high spot. Now this is where the gas is coming through. So is it going to make a seal? Yeah, but we want to have flat on the actual... I should say, so we don't want any big low spots like this concentrated in one area. If, for example, so the shiny area is our high spots, that's good. So if this low spot here was kind of like just in the middle right here, or something of that sort, and we had a high spot all the way around, I would say let's just go with it. The whole bottom does not need to be shiny. In this case, it's probably going to end up being just because I want high spots around the actual rear screw as well. And you can end up with a high spot like that as well, just from putting uneven pressure on the part, which is why it's important to make sure you're applying even pressure in the front and the rear. We're getting pretty close. I'll go just a little bit more on that one. Alright, so you can see all this is now a high area. There's a little bit of low area on that corner right there, but that's not a big deal. We got a nice high area all the way around that screw hole where we're going to be torquing down. So this is going to work just fine. Alright, so now at this point, what we need to do is actually degrease this part as well. And I know, you know, all of your instincts say, you know, this is a shiny metal part. We shouldn't degrease it. We should keep oil on it. But it's going to be sealed, so we don't have to do that. Alright, and I'm not going to wipe it with the oily rag because that defeats the purpose of degreasing it. I see a lot of people do that. They'll actually take degreaser, degrease something, and then take the rag they've been wiping up oil with and hit it. And like, what are you doing? So I'm just going to use air. Air is going to dry that degreaser. And there's a bit of oil. There's a lot of oil coming out of the gas port, so I'll hit that again. Alright, so obviously your degreaser is going to get on other places where you would usually like oil. We'll just put oil there after we're done. Alright, so this part is now prepped and ready to go. Our bolt carrier is prepped and ready to go. Alright, so we have our screws. We'll just keep those here. I'm going to actually get this stuff I don't need anymore out of the way real quick. We will still need the oil. We will need some grease. I'll show you where we're using that. Alright, so what we're going to do at this point is actually take the gas key. We are going to take some of this 638 Loctite, not a thread locker. You need to use 638 Loctite, or there's a mil-spec solution. There's a good word. There's a mil-spec solution that you put on this as well. I don't remember exactly what that is. I always just use this. So just know that this isn't the only option, but you can't use your red or blue Loctite. Don't use a thread locker here. It has to be an actual retaining compound, such as this. Alright, and we'll just put some on here. And I go really lightly around the gas port because some of it is going to get into the gas port area whenever we push this on. And I'll kind of show you what I do to minimize that. Alright, so we got a bunch of that thread locker on there, as you can see. And we'll just take it, lining up our screw holes here, and set it on down. I'm going to take my screws, or actually, before I start putting the screws in, I'm going to put just a bit of oil on these screws here. And as I mentioned before, some people use Loctite here. If you want to use a red Loctite, I mean, I guess that's okay, but we just use oil. We're relying on the stakes to hold everything, and they're going to do a much better job than anything else. Alright, so from here, tightening these down, but I'm just going hand tight for now. Alright. And I'll just take this over to my vise so you guys can see here. And I'm just going to hold that gently. Alright. So I know your next question, is there a torque spec we need to go to on those screws that you just did hand tight? Yes, there is. That torque range is between 50 to 58 inch-pounds. Alright. So I have my Fix-It Sticks torque attachment here, and I'm just going to go just over 50 inch-pounds. Alright, let's get it set up here, and I'll just watch that. Alright, and I just went ahead to 55 on those, right in the middle there. 55 on the front. Alright, so now they are properly torqued. Now before this Loctite 638 starts setting up, I'm just going to come to the actual gas key itself and just give a quick burst of air in there. Alright, so what that's going to do, any of that 638 Loctite that kind of oozed over that gas port, that air just kind of blasted it out. Either blasted it out completely or just kind of made it flush. There's not so Loctite 638 is pretty thick, so whenever you do that, it's not going to blow all down into your actual bolt carrier. And I mean, you can even check for that. You can stick something in where that gas port comes down, and you can see that none of it actually came out. All we did was just remove it from covering the hole if it was. Alright, so now all we need to do at this point is stake it, and that's where our handy dandy Brownells staking fixture comes in. So what we'll do, if you notice there's one screw on the front here, we'll insert our bolt carrier forward. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove one of these staking screws to show you here. There are 4 of these screws in the tool. And if you notice, they have a nice sharp point on them. That's what's going to actually do the staking. We don't need a hammer or anything like that. And on these screws, I got a good bit of grease on them now, but I like to keep a nice amount of grease on these screws here, because we're going to be putting some torque on them, and that's just going to help prolong our thread life. Alright, righty tighty, lefty loosey. Like I mentioned before, I already have a bunch of grease on these, on the rest of these screws, so I'm not going to do all of them here. Alright, so now what we want to look out for before we tighten everything down, what I'll do is I'll hand tighten this front screw. So this front screw is just going to hold the bolt carrier in place. And it doesn't have to be super tight. You can actually, most of the time when I use this tool, I just hand tighten it. I don't get on it with a tool. Alright, so I will let the tool come all the way forward, tighten that there, let the bolt carrier come all the way forward, tighten that. Now I'm going to tighten my rear screw here by hand, and you can see, I got grease all over my pointing tool here now, so bear with me. Alright, so as you can see here, that tool, the actual staking screw is protruding. Now what you want to do is look at it, verify that it is center in line with the gas key screw. Most of the time it very much will be. So I'll just tighten this front one down a little more. And just to kind of verify everything, I'll hand tighten all these. Make sure they're all, you might be able to see them on camera protruding there. But make sure they're all center line. the tool's designed so that they will be. You shouldn't have to worry about that. Alright, and I'm going to throw this in the vise so you can watch the rest of this process unfold. Now the tool itself has these big wings cut on it. That's so you can put it in a vise. I'm going to hold it a little bit differently just so everybody can see what's going on here. I'll turn this towards the camera because that's where you guys are. You're at the camera. Alright, now you should be able to have a pretty clear view of everything we're doing here. Alright, so what I'll do is take my tool here and, yep, I remembered correctly. We'll need to change bits. That's what we're looking for. Now, I've never really went to any specific torque range at this point, but I like to use this specific torque range, and I'll show you why. So, when I'm tightening this down, I'll just start with this one here. Just pick one to start with. And I'll tighten it, and you can see that stake forming. You can see it happening. Alright, we'll stop about right there, and that is, let's see here. That looks like about 25 inch-pounds. Alright, so what I'm going to do, now that I know what torque this one is, because I visually inspected it as I was tightening it down. When the stake looked how the stake should look, which I'll show you how it should look here shortly, don't worry. Whenever I got to that torque range, alright, I knew that this particular setup takes 25 inch-pounds. I noticed that, I don't know if it's the variation in materials and different things like that. Sometimes, yeah, well, gas keys use different coatings. This one's a phosphate coating. That changes your torque range a little bit, so you can't really just stick with one number for everything. Alright. Let's see, what number did I start with here? You guys remember? That's right, 25 inch-pounds. I heard somebody out there say it. Alright. And I like to kind of do left, right, left, right. Honestly, with this, it really doesn't matter. All the bolts that need to be torqued are torqued. You don't need to do it that way. I guess it's more of just an OCD thing on my part. I don't know. There we go. Alright, so before we can remove it, obviously, we need to back these screws off, which is what I almost forgot to do. Alright, there we have it. Now I'll try to get you, I'll put it right here, do a little spin here so you can see the actual stakes. And the important thing to notice here, remember the heads of these screws are knurled, right? It has all those little lines cut in them. That's done so that whenever you stake it and push that metal onto those knurls, that helps grab it. So this thing isn't going anywhere. We have it nice and flat. We have that Loctite securing it, filling any potential gaps there. This is done correctly. So if yours looks like this, you followed this process, then congratulations, you have a properly staked, or properly installed, I should say, gas key on your AR-15. Now, I know some of you out there may be wanting to take a budget bolt carrier group and do this to it. You certainly can. It probably certainly will help out. Chances are that budget build, or that budget company's bolt carrier group, did not install it this way. So you're definitely not going to hurt anything by doing it. Just remember, every time you change your gas key, you have to change the gas key and the screws. Don't recycle any parts from the process. You got to get new ones. Unless you bought a bolt carrier group where the gas key was not staked at all, then you can basically use that gas key and screws to start this whole process. But I would kind of warn against buying those for reasons we explained earlier in this video. So if you're watching this video on the Brownells website, everything I used here will be linked below the video. If you're watching it on YouTube, then too bad, YouTube won't let us do that. So go just jump over to the website for it, and it'll all be there. Don't worry. I'll put it there personally. So if you have any questions or comments, and you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to post them down below. Or feel free to give us a call on the tech line. We'll be happy to help you out. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.